Think of the horror or science fiction movie you watched that left you creeped out and feeling genuinely disturbed. Maybe it was a movie like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Stepford Wives. They live. Think of the feeling you had identifying with the characters trapped in a world that had gone insane, but a world that still looked plausibly enough like the real world that you couldn't tell. It's a sensation called derealization, and it happens in the real world, not just the movies. We're going to talk about what happens to our minds when the world becomes the dystopian nightmarescape that we thought existed only in dreams and only in fiction. The Western world is in full derealization, and it is quite literally driving sane people crazy. It's dark, and it's frightening. Come with me to look it straight in the eye tonight on Disaffected. The past 2 weeks have been difficult for me mentally. Last week we talked about how disturbing it was that just a week after it happened, it's as if there was never an assassination attempt on President Trump's life. It was as if nothing of consequence happened in the real world. And it's gotten worse. Quite literally overnight, we are watching the Democrats create an entirely new person called Kamala Harris, who everyone loves. And we're learning that everyone has always loved her. She's not the least popular vice president in history, as demonstrated by every poll. She's Cam. She had Megan Thee Stallion perform for her campaign rally. And we all know that no rap stars twerk for anyone unless they're really something special, right? Kamala is no longer an Indian American, despite the fact that she created her image years ago, playing on her half Indian heritage. That's India, not American Indian, not Native American. Now she's an American black woman, and she's always been black, we are told. We can tell this because we heard her speak this week in Atlanta.
And you all helped us win in 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024.
No, we won't. As a viewer put in the comments on last week's show, my black woman Southern accent is better than Kamala Harris's. Maybe they should hire me. At the Olympics this week, we are learning that everything humans have known about ourselves since before recorded history is wrong. Male and female are not real. They do not index to any real-world traits. They are merely labels that we use for things we like and things that we don't like. That's all they are. You know, years ago, South Park predicted that we would end up where we have ended up. There was an episode mocking leftist girl bossery that pitted a female character called Strong Woman against wrestler Randy Macho Man Savage. And he beat the living tar out of Strong Woman because he was simply a stronger woman. More recently, that scene has come to life with someone called Will Thomas, a mediocre college swimmer who, overnight, decided to call himself Leah, which instantly made him a woman, and he started taking all the trophies in women's swim competitions. Here we see him on the podium. He's simply a stronger, faster, better woman. It became even more real this week. Italian boxer Angela Carini stepped into the boxing ring at the Olympics to fight Algerian boxer Imani Khalif. This is Angela Carini. This is her female opponent, Imani Khalifi. Take a look. Here's another picture of her female opponent. Here's another picture of her female opponent. I think that we should all see the end of the sparring match between Angela and Imani in case reality has not yet become perfectly clear. It is clear, is it not, that Imani Khalif is a man. It appears that he may have a disorder of sexual development, or what is otherwise called being intersex. Everyone lies about everything all the time now, so it is not possible to know this for sure. But the International Boxing Association in 2023 disqualified Imani Khalif from women's competitions because they found that he had XY chromosomes. XY chromosomes mean male. There are no females who have XY chromosomes. Even if Imani Khalif was raised as a girl, and even if Imani Khalif does indeed have an intersex condition, he is a male. And everyone can see that. Everyone does see that. But they say that they cannot see it. And they call people who can see it crazy and bigoted. And they say that we're out of our minds. Over the past 2 weeks, I've been going in and out of disassociation. This is a common problem for people with PTSD and mood disorders. I'm not wholly disconnected from reality. I'm not hallucinating. But I am having a hard time telling what day it is. I'm having a hard time telling how much time has passed. I can't tell whether I finished a task or whether I dreamt that I finished that task or whether I fantasized that I finished that task. And I have also been experiencing something called derealization. After writing about this on Substack, it's clear that many people around me are experiencing the same thing. Derealization is the name for a state where the world starts to seem unreal, as if it isn't actually objectively there. It's not just that things feel off. That's part of it, they do, but it isn't just that. It's that one begins to actually question, really question, whether the world is real or whether one is losing one's mind. This has happened to me before, and it happened more frequently in my teens and my early 20s when I was much more mentally sick than I am now. Derealization is that feeling that you get when you watch a movie that you find particularly disturbing and creepy, usually a sci-fi or a horror movie. Something like They Live, that movie from the 1980s, where everything looks just about real, but it's in the uncanny valley. And it's profoundly disturbing. I'm trying to figure out how to explain the subjective experience. It's really important. We're getting down to the level of what philosophers call qualia. And that's a word for what does it feel like to feel the thing, right? It talks about the fact that there are experiences that are so subjective that we cannot perceive them in other people. But derealization, that's the feeling if you've had a nightmare, or a truly terrifying nightmare, not just a bad dream, but one that really genuinely shook you to your core. Derealization is that subjective emotional feeling that you remember from having a nightmare, except you're experiencing that emotion when you're awake and you know that you're awake. It's happening to me now because the world has gone insane. I'm not going insane, and neither are you. This is a chink in my armor. This is a weakness that I have. I am vulnerable to derealization and decompensation when the objective world around me becomes sufficiently irrational, and it's there right now. Derealization is also often a part of panic attacks. And panic attacks are not just, oh, I felt really anxious and nervous. They also have a much deeper qualia level subjective experience of terror. Derealization is most common in people who have forms of PTSD, borderline personality disorder, mood disorders. Sometimes schizophrenics can experience it as well. I had my first panic attack with derealization at 16 years old when I drove home to visit my mother in her trailer. She was sitting in the corner of a darkened room with the curtains drawn in the middle of the day, smoking at me from her recliner. And the dimensions of the room seemed to shift in front of me in my visual field in impossible ways. I can't even describe them. Eldritch angles is the best I can do. I had to dig my nails into my palms with my hands under my ass to stop myself from screaming, to stop my mother from seeing that I was losing my mind in front of her. My next major panic attack happened a few years later at home with my roommate Lisa, and the derealization in that one did actually reach hallucinatory levels. I became convinced that the people who, the ancestors in Lisa's black and white family photographs on the wall were actually avatars of Satan, and that they were staring at me. I made her turn every photo around on the wall, and I shook and vomited for about 20 minutes until the panic attack ceased. And then a couple of years later, I was in college, and I had another hallucinatory panic attack, this time in the Manhattan apartment of a college professor who was giving art class in her own home. So there I was, trapped in a New York City building, losing my mind, and chain-smoking cigarettes, hiding in the bathroom, begging God to let me die. A psychiatrist put me on a moderately high dose of Klonopin for about a 4 or 5 month course, which kept me stable, and I tapered off that successfully. Since that point, I have not had a panic attack like that one. But you don't have to have full-blown panic attacks to experience derealization. It can be less severe than what I've described. Thankfully, my recent derealization has been less severe, but it's been quite difficult. And readers and viewers tell me that it's been happening to them too, including people who say they don't have mental disorders or the kinds of mental weaknesses that people like me have. It's happening to normal people, from what they tell me. If it's happening to you, I can't know for sure, but I don't think it's you. It's the world. You are not crazy. There's a scene in The Exorcist, the movie The Exorcist, that captures what it feels like to live in an unreal world where people refuse to see the truth even when you've seen them witness it with their own eyes. Ellen Burstyn's character, Chris McNeil, is the mother in the film. She portrays the frustration of the disbelieved, the lonely despair of being the one person who will acknowledge the horrible reality. The reality that everyone can see, but that everyone else is pretending is something other than what it is. And for those who are not familiar with the movie, yes, it's that movie about the girl who's possessed. The film is much deeper than the glib idea that it's just some scary movie about a demon. The tone is nothing like the modern, self-conscious, glib so-called horror films. There's no millennial insouciance. There's no Gen X irony. The story is told straight. And the reason the movie scares so badly and the reason it holds up is because it seems real. You believe that this could be happening. What's going on in this movie could be happening in the house right next door to you, right here in the real world. The film obviously has themes of good and evil, the godly and the satanic, but running underneath that are contemplations of what it means to be a human, how humans create their own hell. It talks about the dissolution of the stable family and the effects of that on children, and the modern condition of being spiritually lost in an ever baser, mundane world. Everybody has an image in their head of the most extreme scenes in that movie, but for me, there's a quieter scene that doesn't have any special effects that represents the heart of the story. It represents at least the heart of what I take from the story. Chris McNeil, the mother in the movie, is a Hollywood actress whose 12-year-old daughter named Reagan is possessed by the devil. Reagan is confined to a bedroom. She's tied to her bed in a Georgetown townhouse because she's destructive to herself and others, and no doctors can figure out what's wrong with her. Chris, her mother, takes her to a hospital for every test imaginable. Reagan gets scanned, poked, prodded, hypnotized, spinal tapped, and more. The doctors keep pushing her mother, Chris, to accept that it's epilepsy that is causing her daughter's skin to rot, that it's epilepsy that's causing her voice to deepen and spew obscenities that she's never even heard before. and that it's epilepsy that compelled this 12-year-old girl to bloody her own vagina by violently masturbating with a crucifix. Chris, her mother, can't take it anymore. She's exhausted, she's scared out of her mind, and she's utterly alone. Nothing that is going on with her daughter is normal, and the most educated doctors in the world don't know what they're talking about, and they won't admit that something bigger than them is going on. Here's that scene.
She's heavily sedated. She'll probably sleep through tomorrow.
What was going on in there? How could she fly off the bed like that?
Pathological states can induce abnormal strength, accelerated motor performance. For example, say a 90-pound woman sees her child pinned under the wheel of a truck, runs out and lifts the wheels a half a foot up off the ground. You've heard the story. Same thing here. Same principle, I mean.
So what's wrong with her?
We still think the temporal lobe.
Oh, what are you talking about, for Christ's sakes? Did you see her or not? She's acting like she's fucking out of her mind, psychotic, like a split personality or...
Did you see her or not? That's the question that's been on my mind. Did you see any of this or not? So many of us have tried to tell everyone what's wrong with gender ideology on every level. People have been trying to wake up the public to the danger of this for years. Angela Carini was punched harder than she's ever been punched in her life in the boxing arena at the Olympics by a man who calls himself a woman. Everyone knows it's not true. The Olympics knows, Imani Khalif knows, the media knows, the sports teams know. Everyone knows it. Did you see him or not? Many of us have seen him all along. Those who have seen the truth for years have been told that we are bigots, that we're lying, that we're overly emotional, that we're melodramatic, that we are wicked, that we are causing trans women to be killed by pointing out that sex is a real property of the world and the human body, for pointing out that sex matters and pretending that it doesn't is a mental poison and an invitation to physical abuse. Pardon me while I blot. It is the height of summer here. None of this was enough. Laurel Hubbard, taking women's weightlifting medals wasn't enough. Even when everyone could see that fat, obvious male in his singlet with his micro penis, they acted like they couldn't see it. Here it is. Now, a woman has been beaten by a man in front of the world at the Olympics, and she's had to forfeit what she's worked for her entire life. It still won't be enough. I think we're too far gone. I don't think anything real matters anymore. And I'm not sure it ever will for the rest of my life. But I see it. And I know that you see it too. And you know, in reality, it doesn't matter what I think about the sexual bodily reality of Imani Khalif. It doesn't matter what you think. Here's what matters. We are being psychopathically gaslit. We are being lied to at psychopathic scale. And it's scaring the hell out of me. It should scare the bejesus out of you. Whether he's a man in every way, whether he is a man with a disorder of sexual development, or whether he is a woman, yes, so unlikely as to be comical. Look at what's being done to us, no matter which of those options you believe is true. Look at what's being done to all of us, me and you, even if you disagree with me. We, all of us, we can all see with our naked eye that Imani Khalif looks like any other young, muscular man. Everyone sees it. We see his male brow ridge. We see his male cheekbones. We see his male deep-set eyes. We see his man's jaw. We see his man's skeleton. We see the male shoulders, the square shoulders. They're obvious. The musculature is obvious. The straight, narrow male hips are obvious. The lack of breasts is obvious. Everyone can see this. Even those who claim to believe that he's a woman, they see what I see. Even people who find my reaction distasteful and feel like they need to defend Imani against mean people like me or like you, they too know that when they put their eyes on him, they saw a man just like you and I did. They know this. Think about that. They know it. What do you think about people who know something and say they don't know it? What does that tell you about their character? What does it tell you about their trustworthiness? Yeah, I'm talking about some of your family and friends. I'm talking about some of mine, too, in the past. We are humans. We have senses, and sex detection is instinctive and it is normal. You see what I see, though you be woke and I be not, for example. And yes, I do understand you don't have to be woke to see it slightly differently from me. But it wouldn't hurt. If we can agree on that, notice what we're being told by the media, the Olympics, and almost everyone. This is what they're saying to us. You're crazy. You don't see what you say you see. Women look like this. The problem is you personally. There's something weird about you personally that sets you apart from others, and it's something that makes you suspect and immoral. Stop saying what you see. You don't see what you say you see. And are you sure you took your medicine this morning? Yeah, I've gotten that. I've gotten that exact line this week. I'm really worried about Josh. I don't know if he's taking his medicine. Hello, mother. That's what respectable media and institutions are doing to all of us. My brother and sister and I grew up in a household, as you know, that was run this way. This is exactly the kind of psychological distortion and abuse that our mother used to break us. It was a horror of a childhood, and it left all of us damaged and scarred. This is behavior that comes from cluster B personality disorders, excess narcissism, Machiavellianism, sadism. These are severe, dangerous mental pathologies. Cluster B is what animates the domestic abuser, the child abuser, the murderer, the rapist. Psychopaths are cluster Bs. I sound so strident about this because I know what's happening. I can see it. I've lived the consequences of how dangerous this is, and I know that I'm right. And yes, I know how that sounds. I know. I can't help it. I know that I'm right. I know what I know. I am not wrong. And a lot of people know that too. They just won't say it. Please notice how you are being psychologically abused and manipulated. Please reach down and grab a hold of your self-respect and develop that righteous anger that is appropriate when someone abuses you this way. Don't accept it. Don't apologize. Don't back down. No matter where you are politically, even if you think that Imani might even be a woman, you do know that no one is crazy for looking at Imani and seeing a man. You know that. Even if you disagree with me and you think he might be a woman, you do know it. Are you a big enough person to admit that? And to stop abusing other people who see it too? Our betters in this society this is how far they're willing to go. They are willing to act psychopathically to keep us in line, to convince us that we are the insane ones, we are the unstable ones. This is the war that personality disordered parents wage on their children. It is the war that cutthroat CEOs wage on their underlings, and it is the war that the most virulent cluster Bs in political history have waged against their own people, that have cost humanity hundreds of millions of people murdered in the 20th century. We have to protect ourselves. We have to reverse this. Our lives very probably depend on stopping this. After the break, we're going to talk to licensed clinical social worker and therapist Pamela Garfield-Jaeger for a clinician's perspective on derealization and how to maintain stability in unstable times. Come back for it on the other side.
Disaffected is now streaming on X. Come with us each Sunday and dare to notice reality. You can find us on X at DisaffectedPod.
Do you get something from Disaffected you don't find anywhere else? Well, you can help produce the show. Supporting members get access to our private Discord chat server, meetups, and audio episode recording sessions with guests. Sign up at disaffectedpod.substack.com or at subscribestar.com/disaffected. Welcome back. Don't forget to follow us on X/Twitter. We are at DisaffectedPod, and we are now streaming at 9 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time on X/Twitter, and also on Rumble and YouTube. We are joined now by therapist and licensed clinical social worker Pamela Garfield-Jaeger, who is going to talk to us about derealization from a clinician's perspective. Welcome, Pamela.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for coming on. We'll start with the usual stuff. Introduce yourself. Tell people what kind of work you do as a therapist, and what's your orientation to the world of therapy and trauma and symptoms like derealization is.
Yeah, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Most of my experience was in New York and in California. And I worked in group homes, so I worked a lot with foster kids, so obviously a lot of trauma patients there. And then I also worked in residential treatment programs and outpatient treatment programs with adults and teens in California. And I've also worked in a lot of schools. And I was clinical supervisor for school-based counselors in Palo Alto, California.
Okay.
That's what I did do. I should say what I'm doing now. Now, since I've been canceled for speaking a lot of the truth, now I do consultations with families and help them understand what's non-captured, ideologically driven mental health care.
Yeah, you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I do want the audience to know that Pamela is, yes, again, another sane mental health professional who has been professionally pushed out of the field for insisting on practicing actual therapy rather than validating maladaptive defensive traits. That's a very complicated way of saying I think they probably don't like that you don't like gender ideology.
That's the big one. And I also don't like critical race theory, and I don't like victim mentality, and I don't like to give patients the message that everything is the world's fault and none of their own.
Yeah, well, that's because you are an actual therapist. This is the normal therapeutic attitude that has been developed as the discipline has created itself over the past 150 years, really, that psychology has been a going concern in the West. But of course, and I talk about this with my own therapist, the majority of what we see out there that is called therapy is not only inadequate, it's actually anti-therapeutic.
Yes.
And nobody wants to hear that. So let's talk about derealization. In the first part of the show, I shared some of my personal experiences. I've had some extreme bouts of derealization in my life, not recently, but I've gone into hallucinatory territory. That's not going to be the case for everybody. From your position, as someone who works directly with people and who has seen people who've experienced that, tell us, define derealization from your point of view.
Yeah, so derealization is when you kind of almost have that outer body experience. You don't feel like the world is real. You kind of feel like you're living in this twilight zone. And I mean, it can get really extreme. Like you said, it can get to hallucinations. Usually it's more like you're disconnected from your body, or you kind of feel like you have cotton in your brain, or things look warped, things sound warped, things sound louder than they should be or softer than they should be. Your senses are off. And you just kind of feel like you're floating from your body. Those are some descriptions. I mean, I see that as a trauma response usually, or just a reaction to some high stress.
Yeah, and there's a subjective emotional component that I want to try to get across to people, and everything you just described, is part of derealization. But the thing that, in my view, that makes it especially horrifying to experience is, I mean, yes, the world looks weird. Your senses can be distorted. You can feel that you're not actually in the real world, or that the world isn't real, or maybe it seems to. I think it overlaps in some cases with what we call depersonalization as well. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily, but often there's a component of that, feeling like you're not real, you're not yourself, you're a character. But there's a subjective emotional distress to it, and the best way I can describe it for people is that it is the emotional state that you feel when you are in a particularly bad nightmare, except that you are experiencing that emotion while you know that you are awake. And for me, that is what scares me about bad derealization episodes, because it feels like the dream world is more real than the real one. Where do you see, what kinds of people, what kinds of conditions do you believe are most prone to derealization in terms of mental disturbances?
In my clinical experience, the people that I've seen that struggle with it are the people who have some kind of trauma or early attachment issues. But I've also read that people with schizophrenia can have it. It's hard to tease out. Also, a lot of the people that I work with, they were on medications, and it's hard to detach what is a side effect from medication and what is an effect of something else, their mental state or something. People who use marijuana experience this. So there's a drug element to it. So you've got substance abusers that can experience it too. So there are a lot of variables, and that's the thing about psychology. It's not a hard science, and there's a lot we don't know about the brain and human beings and individuals. So it's hard to tease out.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting me right now is, as you know, I wrote a couple of pieces about this on Substack recently, and it got some of the most comments and feedback of any piece I've written for at least a year. And I'm hearing from people who tell me that they are experiencing what I'm describing, but many of these people say, I've never been diagnosed with a lot of people with mental disorders are never diagnosed, stipulated. I understand that. But these are people who don't experience themselves. They don't have PTSD. They don't have a personality disorder that they know of. They don't have a major mood disorder. They're not schizophrenic. And many of them are saying, I'm experiencing something like this for the first time in my life. And my provisional hypothesis is the world is, in fact, not opinion, but in objective fact, going crazy. We are being told crazy things that are not true and that are contradictory. We are being told to accept that contradictions are true. And it is so relentless that I'm starting to believe that derealization, which I only ever thought of as happening with these mental disorders, may be happening to otherwise, quote unquote, normal people because of the extremity of society. What do you think about that? Whether you agree, disagree, or see it some way, some third way?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. I mean, I think we have a similar worldview. I think a lot of the media and all these messages that we're getting, all of the lies, the relentless lies, it is likened to an abusive relationship. And these symptoms happen when you're in a very abusive relationship and you can no longer check in with your own sense of reality. And the staple of psychology for a long time has been cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's about reality testing and reality checking. And you ground yourself to deal with anxiety and depression by checking in with reality. But if you can't do that reality checking, it's really hard to feel stable.
Okay, I mean, I'm conflicted on that because, of course, it gives me validation for my opinion, and I do have an ego that I am prone to. So I like that part, but the part I don't like is that I don't want us to be right about this. But I think we are. Because reality testing and reality checking has been on my mind big time, too. That's exactly right. How can we test reality when we try to do it, right? Like, take the example, that I used in the first segment of the show. We are being told that when we're watching the Olympics, we just watched a male, somebody who, this is not an opinion, anybody who does not believe me may check behind me and they will confirm that I am telling the truth. Imani Khalif from Algeria, the boxer who clobbered the Italian Angela Carini at the Olympics, does in fact have XY chromosomes. This is an established fact as far as we can say. That does mean male. There is no way in which that means female. He may have a disorder of sexual development that some people call intersex, but even if that is the case, he is still a male. And all of us, we can see this. You, Pamela, can see it. I can see it. Kevin can see it. Every single person listening to me right now, every human actually on Earth, will look at Imani Khalif and instantly code him as male. Mm-hmm. That's real. There's nothing crazy about that. That's just ordinary sense information. But when people say that, they're being told, and not just by their friends, but by government agencies, by respectable media, even though it shouldn't be respectable, people do treat it as if it is. And they're being told by people who represent official Olympic sporting bodies and medical testing bodies that they are not seeing what they're seeing. And they're being told that they are crazy and bigoted for simply saying, I see a man. How can you reality test in this atmosphere?
Yeah, I've experienced that exact thing. We were actually talking offline. I did one little comment on Twitter and said he's a man and it was unfair. And I'm still several days later getting piled on for saying that. And it's tough. The good news is I think a few years into the real high level of madness, I think post 2020, a lot of us have found each other that are very much we value truth and reality. So I think finding those other people, it helps ground you, but it's still tough to be in a world with sometimes family and friends, people in our regular everyday life that cannot recognize that reality matters and that it's what is true is true.
Being unable to recognize that reality matters. And the world has taken it, I think, a step further. We're not supposed to say that reality matters, but it's worse. Asserting that there is such a thing as reality is itself treated as a social sin.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's cliche, but it's cliche because it's true. This is quite literally the story of the emperor's new clothes. Mm-hmm. And I suppose this is what goes on. There's a writer. We haven't had him on for a while. I think it'll probably be time to have him back soon. His name is Harrison Cayley. He's on Substack. He writes a blog called Political Ponerology, Ponerology. And this is based on a book called Political Ponerology by a Soviet dissident who cataloged the development of the psychopathic state. And he called societies that become ruled by literal clinical cluster Bs, including a high proportion of psychopaths and malignant narcissists. He called these pathocracies. That pathology characterizes the state. It's the fundamental condition of it. It's not a feature of, it's what it is. This kind of thing has gone on in societies that we look back on and think of and call totalitarian, communist, this, that, but this is happening to us here right now, and I think that has some interesting implications.
That's exactly what's happening. Yeah, this is taking the cues from all of those past totalitarian governments, and we are under it. We are under tyranny. What you just described is the critical theory, is that there is no truth and it's subjective truth. And then socially, you said it is a sin because people want to always say things are nuanced and there's different points of view and there's different ways of seeing things. Well, sometimes the truth is not in the middle. Sometimes the truth is the truth.
Thank you for saying it. I've been kind of on a probably unwise tear on Twitter for the past few days. That's one of my weaknesses. And I have felt compelled to tell people in very blunt terms, stop trying to get me to play nuance. Take your nuance and get away from me. I'm not having that conversation with you. I'm not going to allow you to muddy the waters. I'm not going to let you complicate it because it's not necessary, and we are not morally obligated to stop all other goals and satisfy nuance so that we can tap dance and demonstrate to you that we've done all the work and we're not really bad people. This is distracting us from stopping a reality that's right in front of us. And in this case, just this example, we are now at the point where the Olympics has not one, but two biological males. It's not just Imani Khalif. It's, I'm not going to say the name because I've forgotten it, but it's a Chinese boxer who is also XY male. They are now the champions in women's boxing. They are going to face off against each other. That's how far we've gone. The Olympics now calls men women literally. This is literally a South Park episode. It's not like it. It is it.
Yeah, you've probably seen that comparison of that specific episode.
Yep.
They did and they even had the blue and red uniforms the same, which is wild.
I know. Everything. Oh, that's so extreme. Oh, we have to, unfortunately, I think this is also related, and I'll stop after this. I've got another question I think your expertise is really going to matter on. Unfortunately, I believe this is also a side effect of a society and a conversational style that has become excessively feminized, because I'm noticing that while many more men are doing this than they used to, and I find that in itself disturbing, I'm seeing this demand for nuance, this demand to display empathy, to display sympathy, and to do that as a primary goal before we accomplish the other goals is very female typical. And I'm seeing a lot of women who are coming at people, not just me, but people who have my point of view, and saying, you're extreme, you're over the top, you're cruel. You're not being kind enough. You're losing us credibility. You won't be nuanced enough. People are going to think you're a simpleton, and you're ruining our chances of fixing everything. And frankly, I think they're the ones who are doing that. I think they are the ones who need to get out of the way and say, this is no time to split hairs.
Yeah, I agree. I've had an evolution, so I probably was one of those insufferable women to a degree in the past. I've certainly changed. I used to believe that helping kids express their feelings was helpful. Sometimes now I don't even believe that. I think we should stop telling them how they're be mindful of their feelings and just let them go play and let them yell their anger and then stop it, and not give them a feelings wheel and have them pick out feelings, because I think it's making them all neurotic. And I didn't always agree with that sentiment, but that is definitely, women came up with that, not men. So
yeah, absolutely. I've been guilty too, because I was, up until I was 41 years old, I was a leftist Democrat, male feminist, best gay man ever, I spewed all this crap for years. I've had a complete change of heart myself, but I understand it from having been it myself. In brass tacks, so we've got people out there who are in distress right now. They're having trouble reality testing. they are experiencing something in the neighborhood of derealization. I know that you're not giving therapy. This is only informational. Nothing that comes on this show is medical advice or lawyer advice or anything like that. But do you have any suggestions for people, tactics, ways to think about this, books to read, simple mnemonics, anything like that, that a person can use to help herself when she's having an acute sense of derealization or maybe an ongoing lower level sense of it?
I don't have any books to read offhand, and I haven't done the research on that. But I think about how we are now post 2020, the fact that we're all online, even you and I right now are communicating via Zoom. We're just not in real life the same way. A lot of us are now working from home, and we never were before. We used to have structure. We used to get up at a certain time, brush our teeth, take a shower, and go out and be in the world. And that so many people, that has been taken away. So I'd say the first thing is to try to structure your day. I think the people that are most likely, more easily able to fall into it, especially those that don't have a trauma history or some kind of real psychological disorder, are the people that are home too much, people that are on their screens too much, people that are consuming too much media. I think being out in the world and giving yourself that structure, because that's what we did with the children that have behavioral issues. That's what we did with the trauma. You have to give them structure. Otherwise, they'd act out, and they act out really because they're feeling chaos. They're feeling mental chaos. And that's what's happening. You're experiencing mental chaos. So what is it for you that would help you feel less mental chaos? So one would be giving yourself that structure. It seems like, well, maybe I'll just rest and relax and lay in the bed, but sometimes rest and relaxing can make you ruminate more and send you more into that tailspin. So there's a balance there. Getting outside in nature, it's real technical there, but it's just literally going outside. Let's touch some grass. We've heard that expression before, but it's real. It matters being in the world. For me, sometimes just going out and talking to strangers, like going to the store and actually saying hi or smiling at people, it makes me feel more connected, because I think a lot of what's happening is people are feeling very isolated and disconnected from society because we are so divided. We're given all this hate rhetoric, and we feel like the world is crumbling around us, and then it gives us that chaotic feeling. So sometimes just going out and smiling and having a nice, pleasant conversation with a stranger can make a world of difference. And there's all that mindfulness stuff. It can sound kind of fluffy, but really, getting in touch with your breath, getting in touch with your senses, physical activity, and really getting in touch with your body, your mind body. So sometimes just going for a walk. Those are some quick suggestions.
Yeah, well, it makes sense to me, because one technique that I have found that works for me when I have incipient panic attacks, or when I've gotten, I used to have them a lot. They are much less frequent for me than they used to be, blessedly. But they still happen sometimes. This getting in touch with your body, I have found a combination of distracting my mind from the fact that I'm having a panic attack while I'm doing something tactile helps. So my favorite is I will get up from where I'm sitting and I'll walk over to the bookshelf and I'll say, I'm going to rearrange these books. If they're in alphabetical order, I'm going to put them in color order. Or if they're alphabetized by title, I'm going to re-alphabetize them by author. So I will pick up the book and I'll say, Barbara Kingsolver, K comes before M, right? And I will actually talk out loud to myself as I pick each of these up and I put them into the order. And it really helps. So if people can find some sort of tactile and mental distraction that forces them to interact with the physical world, that I think that can be helpful as well.
I wonder too if the fact that you're putting something in order also adds to the feeling of just calmness.
For me, it does, yeah, because I'm by a slight degree, I am decreasing the chaos and entropy in a room, and I'm bringing order. I'm the board queen. I bring order to chaos.
You can clean your room. Personally, I'm a slob, but sometimes when I feel anxious, just doing some cleaning helps.
It really does. It really does. Absolutely. Jordan Peterson was right. Get up and make your bed.
Clean your room. I can't do his accent.
I know. Just do Kermit the Frog and you'll be close enough.
Okay.
I'm not insulting him. I have great respect for him, but he does sound like Kermit the Frog, and he knows it. Pamela, thank you for your time. I want to let people know where they can find you online, because I know that you do publish sometimes, although you're not as active on social media as some, and you are also available for consultations, private consultations, are you not?
Yes, I am. I'm mostly known for helping families, but I can do consultations for anyone. Mostly what I do, I don't provide therapy, but what I do is I help people who are seeing a therapist and maybe don't think that therapist is kosher, and I might help them tease that out, if they just are kosher. I won't tell them exactly whether they're good or bad, but I'll help them figure that out. And usually it has to do with, let's find out if they're woke and ideologically driven and not doing what is traditionally therapeutic. I work a lot with families, a lot with parents who are concerned about their children with the trans issue, helping them figure out what to do. A lot of times I'm about empowering people to handle it within their family and not always run straight to an expert. I don't want to always put myself as the expert. I would like more people to believe in themselves. I think in certain ways that's how we've gotten into this mess, because people outsource to experts too quickly. Not that there isn't a place for seeing a professional, clearly, but I think sometimes people need to believe in themselves. So that's that's the theme of my consultations. And you can find me on thetruthfultherapist.org. That's my website. I just published a book called A Practical Response to Gender Distress, Tips and Tools for Families, and that's available on Amazon. It debunks a lot of the lies that the trans activist tells, and it has very specific practical advice on how to handle things with your family, either to prevent your family from getting sucked into the trans agenda or to help you if you've already been, unfortunately, bitten by the bug of the trans agenda. And it's obviously not affirming, and it has lots of suggestions. It there's a trans English dictionary. It has questions you could ask your child to springboard ideas. And it really, I bring my clinical experience, but it's kind of no nonsense, and I don't use a lot of fluffy words, and I don't really I really tried to keep it straightforward. It has a lot of pictures in it. The detransitioners, the people who used to believe they were trans, they gave me permission to print some of their art, which is beautiful and powerful in there. So that's available on Amazon, A Practical Response to Gender Distress. I am very active on Instagram. One way I was coping with my, oh my God, this world is crashing down around me, was I started making funny Instagram reels, and I think that's how I came on the scene on the internet. Okay. Sometimes I can be funny and sarcastic on Instagram. People enjoy that, making fun of therapists a little bit. But I try to be educational, sometimes being serious.
Let me repeat this for people. thetruthfultherapist.org is where you can find Pamela, and I'm sure you can spring onto her social media from there. I'm glad to know you're out there. I'm sorry that, like me and so many of the guests like you that I've had on, I'm sorry that you also have faced a cancellation, but I'm really grateful that somebody with a stable and sane and reasonable point of view like you is out there. And thank you for coming on the show and talking to me for the audience, Pamela. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, everybody. You know what it's time for? It's Biltong time. Anton Van Vuren and landofbiltong.com, as you know, are our official and first sponsors of Disaffected. Biltong is, well, it's a better kind of beef jerky. It's better than any beef jerky you've ever gotten in a convenience store. It's a South African way of very thinly slicing and vinegar spice curing meat. All different kinds of beef, all different levels of spice, game as well, things like venison. Go to landofbiltong.com. This is a great snack. I love to have a bag of it next to me when I'm writing. It's very good for you. Animal protein, animal fat, no carbs, fits in with keto, fits in with, does it fit in with paleo? Maybe they'd say no because maybe cavemen didn't have vinegar. But it's good for you anyway. And we've got 2 discount codes. If you want to get 10% off your order, use promo code JOSH10, or if you'd like free shipping, just use promo code JOSH. Thank you very much, and we will see you after the break.
Disaffected is now streaming on X. Come with us each Sunday and dare to notice reality. You can find us on X at DisaffectedPod.
Do you get something from Disaffected you don't find anywhere else? Well, you can help produce the show. Supporting members get access to our private Discord chat server, meetups, and audio episode recording sessions with guests. Sign up at disaffectedpod.substack.com or at subscribestar.com/disaffected. Welcome back. More news of creeping totalitarianism. We've got two things from Vermont here. And you know what? I just thought of this. We took a break. And during that break, this behind the magic curtain of television or computer or whatever this is today, I looked around at a couple of news items. And it reminded me, when we bring you these stories from Vermont, we're not doing it. When people talk about stuff like that, oh, this is local interest, right? We news consumers have been used to making this distinction between issues of national concern and those that are local. And of course, there are issues that are local and not national and vice versa. But these are not local interest stories that we're just putting in here to pad the show out. We're bringing them to you because we are a canary in the coal mine, and what happens here is going to happen in your area. And that came to mind. I'm not going to talk about it very much. I may talk about it more next week. But if you don't know what's going on in England right now, it's beginning to look very frightening. English people, white English people, whom the Prime Minister is calling far right, who is calling them thugs. These are just ordinary working class people who have had enough. They have been subjected to extraordinary foreign immigration, mostly from hostile Muslims. Not Muslims who want to assimilate, hostile Muslims. The government knows this and it's doing it on purpose. They're taking over towns. There are no jobs for anybody born in England anymore, and they are fed the fuck up. And men are starting to riot. They're starting to burn things down. This is predictable. This is absolutely predictable. And the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is delivering speeches. He's taking the side of the foreigners. He's making it very clear that aggressive and hostile foreigners, particularly Muslims, he won't say it this way, but you can listen to his speeches, you'll see what I mean. They will not be prosecuted. They are going to be protected. The police are going after white native English people. Even when there are people who are of foreign extraction on the streets, I've seen it with my own eyes, who are literally carrying knives down the street. They're going after white people. The police are not touching them. This is real. It's actually happening. Think of England as your canary in the coal mine, too. Pay some attention this week to see what's in store for us here. So let's do that with Vermont. Take a look at this headline from the Vermont Daily Chronicle. Dad said no, but school vaccinated student anyway, and Vermont Supreme Court backs them up. I'll read to you a little bit from the story. A Vermont school vaccinated a child against the parents' express orders in 2021. Actually, let me correct myself. This is my words, not the stories. They gave him Pfizer's shot, this school child. And the school claims it was a mistake, and they say that they are, quote, deeply sorry. The deeply is what makes it authentic. That's not believable. They did it on purpose. And they knew they'd get away with it. And they are correct. They did get away with it. Thanks to a decision from the Vermont Supreme Court, which relies on a federal law that is going to make you very angry. Now I'm going to read to you from the article. A U.S. law governing vaccination in a public emergency protects a Windham school district from lawsuit, even though it administered a COVID-19 vaccination to a student without parental permission, and even when the student himself said, quote, "Dad said no," end quote. That's the upshot of a July 26th ruling by the Vermont Supreme Court. The court's decision could send the question of the scope of parental rights in child vaccination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Quote, Principal Mark Spino admitted in a letter to parents a day later that, quote, in the course of vaccinating students at this clinic, a mistake was made. A student whose parents did not consent to vaccination was mistaken for a student whose parents did consent. We are deeply sorry that this mistake happened and have worked internally to improve our screening procedures. Principal Mark Spino. That's a lie. That is a lie. It was not a mistake. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if there's even a 15%. I don't care if there's a 50% chance it was a mistake. I will not believe it, and no one should believe it. It is not believable they did it on purpose. So then, if this is a mistake for which the school is, quote, deeply sorry, then why are they defending themselves in court against the family? What's the motivation? Because it wants to do this. The school intended to do this. It intends to continue doing it. Now it's been given carte blanche to do it. And the federal government has made it possible. Quote, sorry and we'll try harder didn't cut it with Dario and Shujen Polatella, the parents of the child. They filed suit. A lower court dismissed the complaint for, quote, lack of subject matter jurisdiction. The July 26th ruling said in its review of the facts of the case, the Vermont Supreme Court summarized its ruling with this sentence, quote, we conclude that defendants are immune from suit under the Federal Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act, otherwise known as the PrEP Act. And what does that law say? Well, the PrEP Act was enacted on December 30th, 2005 as Public Law 109-148. It addresses liability immunity and creates a compensation program. Critics of COVID-19 vaccine mandates say the law offers too much protection for big pharma and for government agencies and staffers administering vaccine programs during public health emergencies. Well, you don't say. Quote, the Declaration provides immunity from liability, except for willful misconduct, for claims, and it's a bullet-pointed list. Claims of loss caused, arising out of, relating to, or resulting from administration or use of countermeasures to diseases, threats, and conditions determined by the Secretary to constitute a present or credible risk of a future public health emergency, and to entities and individuals involved in the development, manufacture, testing, distribution, administration, and use of such countermeasures. That is complete 100% liability immunity for any action that is asserted to be for a credible, possible public health threat. Do you understand that? Do you understand that this is 100% immunity for even putative conditions that have not been demonstrated to exist? That's federal law. The only relief this family can get is the hope that the U.S. Supreme Court will hear its case if they decide to take it there. If they can get a hearing, I think they've got a good chance of winning with this Supreme Court. And all Americans will win if they do. But the Supreme Court only hears about 1% of all the petitions that go in front of it every year. There are just too many. They can't take more than 1%. They're not doing it to be cussed. There's literally too many cases. I have written briefs for cases, federal cases. I've written friend of the court briefs many times for the Supreme Court for cases that we hoped would set a national precedent, and none of them ever made it. It's always a disappointment, but you are less likely to get heard than not. There's another disturbing sign of totalitarian government here in the Green Mountain State. This is from Vermont Digger. Headline, law enforcement uses roadblock to find jurors for Sheriff John Grismore's trial. I'll read to you from the story. Jury selection for the trial of Franklin County Sheriff John Grismore took place Thursday in North Hero, but the typical court summonses did not produce enough people to seat a full jury. To fill the remaining seats, the court took an unusual approach, pulling drivers over in front of the courthouse. Grismore faces a charge of simple assault in Grand Isle County Superior Criminal Court for kicking a person in custody in August of 2022. His trial is scheduled to begin or was scheduled to begin July 22nd. Quote, in an interview Friday, Grand Isle State's Attorney Doug DeCibito said that Judge Samuel Hoare has the authority to direct the sheriff to find prospective jurors from the public, as happened Thursday afternoon. He said that due to the highly publicized nature of the case, the court dismissed more prospective jurors than usual and ran out during the selection process, end quote. A little more from the story. Grand Isle Sheriff Ray Allen said that on Hoare's instruction, he set up a roadblock on Route 2 outside the courthouse at around 3 p.m., stopped every car that passed, and pulled in 16 people into the selection pool. It took his department 25 minutes in all, he said. The state is really making enemies on this one, including a legislator, a member of the Vermont House. Quote, Andy Julo, the newly appointed Senate House. Andy Julo, the newly appointed state senator for the Grand Isle District, was among those stopped and directed to enter the courthouse, he said. He was returning to his office for a conference call, Governor Phil Scott's briefing on the flooding that devastated large swaths of the state in the 24 hours prior, when he said an officer pulled him over and asked him if he was a Grand Isle resident, over 18, and registered to vote. Next quote. When he said yes to all three, they directed him to park and enter the courthouse. He'd just been summoned for jury duty. Ultimately, Julo was dismissed because the jury was filled before his turn to go before the judge, but he said it still took an hour and he missed his call. Quote, I was pretty angry, but I tried not to be outward about it, he said. Well, an ordinary, normal, mortal citizen was not as restrained. Back to the story. Al Christ of Grand Isle wasn't so restrained. When his wife, Beth Deemling, called him to say she'd be delayed because she was being pulled into a jury draw, he immediately drove up to the courthouse. Quote, I found the sheriff and I wasn't very nice, Christ said. I didn't swear and I didn't threaten, but I got about as close as you can. End quote. Deemling said she had been returning from volunteering in North Hero State Park when she was pulled over. Several other people told her they'd had their work days disrupted. One asked the judge what he should tell his boss. It was very surrealistic, Beth Deemling said. Everybody was kind of in shock. Well, they won't be so shocked when it happens next time, which will be in a few days, and then another next time, and another. And another. Thank you for watching and listening tonight. This is a heavier show. I know there haven't been a lot of funnies, but I didn't think it was appropriate for what's going on this week. Remember that you can see what you can see. Remember that you are not crazy. Remember that you are a sovereign human with your own mind and your own inherent freedom. Keep your true friends and your family close. Talk to them. Reaffirm reality for them, and let them do the same for you. We all need it. And do it in public, too. Time is short for us. May God protect us all, and good night.